We need to talk about Pete Hegseth, America's Secretary of War, as he styles himself. He is now a hugely important person when it comes to the prosecution of the war in Iran. Who is he? What does he believe? And how unusual is he when you look at previous American Secretaries of Defense? Welcome to Americast and to my conversation with Eric Schmidt, who is the national security correspondent of the New York Times, a job he's done since 1990.
Americast from BBC News.
Let's begin with who Pete Hegseth is as a person, because he's not like a normal, if I could use that word in inverted commas, he's not a normal defense secretary, is he? And he wouldn't claim to be.
No, he's not at all. And I think he would take pride in saying he's not. In fact, when his name was first announced, I think we were all scrambling to Google his name. It was kind of had an echo when I heard his name, and he's the Fox News Sunday host. And I'm going, but that can't be the guy they picked to be defense secretary. And as it turns out, of course, he has a military record. He did serve in Afghanistan and in Iraq as a kind of a mid-grade officer with the National Guard. He's from Minnesota. But that hardly, in normal times, qualifies you to be a defense secretary. Typically, that's a senior statesman. If you think of a Don Rumsfeld kind of character who served in Congress as a White House chief of staff, maybe he was a retired general like Jim Mattis or Lloyd Austin, somebody with some credentials. And I think the main credential here was that President Trump had seen and liked him on his performances on Fox News, and that was the voice that he wanted over at the Pentagon.
So how does he organize things? Because he obviously does not have, he simply doesn't have the experience in bureaucracies that it might take to make that work. Has he separated himself off as a kind of leader, totemic figure at the top of it, and let other people do the kind of grunt work, as it were, but the important work of organizational things, or what?
Yeah, typically the defense secretary in the American system is kind of at the top and picks one or two or three main issues to really focus on. Obviously, they work very closely with the president and the rest of the cabinet, but he leaves the day-to-day workings of the Pentagon and kind of the inner grits of that to a deputy defense secretary and all the kind of higher level civilian aides. And of course, then the military runs quite a bit of it as well. So he picks, a good secretary will typically pick one or two items to focus on. And Hegseth, when he came in, made it very clear that his first and foremost objection was going after DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He felt, and he had written about this in previous books and in podcasts and on his Fox News programs, he felt that the United States military had gone woke. It had basically bent over backwards to accommodate minorities, to accommodate women, and that the military that he enlisted in, sometime after 9/11, really to go after enemies of the country, had really gone soft. And so what he was trying, and what he's talked about repeatedly in his writings, and certainly after he came in as as secretary, was to inject more lethality and combat effectiveness inside the United States military, and that we'd gotten bogged down in these wars, the same ones that he'd fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we had to get away from that mindset and really start thinking more broadly to future type threats, whether they be in Russia or China, or as this administration now is focused on the Western Hemisphere and defending the homeland, and also of new technology. So I think those are kind of some of the big issues that he took on right away.
Would a fair-minded person say he's had any success in them?
Well, I mean, it depends on your point of view. Again, one of the first things he did was sack the sitting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an African-American named C.Q. Brown, a fighter pilot who had tremendous wartime fighting credentials. And yet, I think Hegseth has basically insinuated that he only got his job because he was black. He has systematically gone through the senior ranks of all the military services and fired some 24 top generals and admirals. He just recently fired the Army Chief of Staff, Randy George, and that marked the last of the service chiefs of the heads of the various branches of the military services in the U.S. military that he has fired and now is basically putting his own people in. So he is trying to remake the United States military and what he feels is a more with people that he believes are going to be more focused on taking the fight to the enemy, whoever that may be, whether it's drug traffickers on the southwest border of the United States or in the most recent case against the country of Iran.
And of course, if he gets criticism, he is very, very tetchy. Well, in fact, more than tetchy, isn't he? He's actually kicked people out of the Pentagon. Explain the relationship, the Hegseth relationship with those people in the press who ask reasonable questions of what he's doing.
Yeah, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like tough questions. I think his view of a good journalist is somebody who's going to basically echo whatever the party line is coming out of the Pentagon or the White House. We wrote a lot about his shortfalls, his multiple marriages, his drinking problems, his failed businesses. And so it wasn't a pretty sight, and he barely got through the approval process. And I think he kind of took that as brought that grudge with him into the building. And rather than trying to work with the media, obviously there's always going to be tensions with the media, he immediately sought to restrict our access. And ultimately, last fall, confronted us with the option, if we wanted to keep the access to the Pentagon that we've had for many, many years, we would essentially have to sign a loyalty oath. That is, we could only publish information that had been pre-approved by the Pentagon. And of course, with the First Amendment, such as it is here in the U.S., there was no way we were going to do that. And we walked out. The New York Times has sued the Pentagon over this policy, and they're in the midst of litigation to try and get access back into the Pentagon, which is a very important part of our daily job. But we've essentially overcome that. But it's a very combative relationship, even more so than I think pretty much any other secretary I've covered in 35 years. He doesn't, these news conferences we've seen during the Iran war are rare, and they hadn't really happened at all up until the war. Defense secretaries, like other cabinet members and the president, typically travel with the media. He only takes kind of a selected, hand-picked few from a conservative press that he feels will kind of ask safe questions and, again, echo kind of his view of the world and his view of operations. So no, he doesn't like to be challenged, and it's been tricky to kind of get him on the record in confronting him with these things.
When you say the most aggressive ever, I mean, thinking back to Donald Rumsfeld, and people might remember the briefings which were televised during the Iraq War. People of a certain age will remember them, and I certainly remember occasionally being in the room. And frankly, it was terrifying. I mean, because he was on great form, and he's acerbic, isn't he, Rumsfeld, and really capable of kind of putting down individuals, and he often did that. But you're saying Hegseth is more than that.
Well, the thing with Rumsfeld was, you're exactly right. He was acerbic, he was combative, but he was a wrestler in college, and what he liked was confrontation.
Yes, he was, wasn't he?
And if you were prepared, and if you had your ducks in a row, and you were well informed, and you were willing to push back, he respected that. He liked that. He liked the jousting. He wasn't afraid of it. He was supremely confident. Pete Hegseth is not confident. He doesn't have a whole lot of inner self-confidence. He projects like he does, but if I think he did, he would be willing to take us on. So the difference between Hegseth and Rumsfeld is huge in that regard, and that Rumsfeld would take on any comers. And if you made your point, it was rare, but every once in a while he would acknowledge, maybe you've got something there, Schmidt. I don't think you're right most of the time, but every once in a while. Whereas Hegseth doesn't even, entertain that as an option.
And just to underline, if you're not in the Pentagon is this huge building. People will know the building. But the hugeness of it, actually, I don't think is always completely obvious when you just see pictures of it from the outside. This kind of extraordinary mass of corridors and offices. And the crucial point, Eric, is you can sort of roam about, can you? If you're based in there and allowed in there and credentialed to be there, you can talk to people in corridors and glean interesting pieces of information all day.
That's exactly right. It's in a very unusual place to report on in Washington. It's up until recently, it was the largest office building in the world. It has about 20,000 people who work there day in, day out. And you're right, as long as you were credentialed, which means going through a background check and being vetted, you could pretty much go anywhere you wanted in the building, and you would bump into people. I remember running into Secretary Jim Mattis. He picked up his own dry cleaning, and you could walk back to his office with him. It would be off the record, but you could glean a tidbit or two. And you were always running into generals or top officials just in the hallway, and you would have you could confirm things with them or run things by them. And so it was very important just to have, be there and pick up things like that. And right now, that's what we're missing. Secretary Hegseth, for whatever reason, believes that the media is essentially a security risk, and he's treating us as such. Whereas, and again, the decades that I've covered the building, there's never been any kind of breach of security. We take our jobs very seriously. Most of the Pentagon correspondents working there have been there for years, if not decades. And it's a very important job. We take it very seriously.
We were talking earlier about his relationship with God and specifically how that affects the Pentagon, but also more widely, actually, the kind of broader right. There was this extraordinary story, I think it was the Free Press, wasn't it, reporting a few days ago that they'd actually called in the Vatican's ambassador to Washington, D.C. to complain about the Pope, which takes Hegseth and his people into a very new place.
Yes, I mean this is a secretary who wears his religion very much on his sleeve. He has introduced regular prayer briefings, prayer meetings in the Pentagon, which have been going on for years, but he publicizes them and actively encourages people to do that. Look, there's nothing wrong with being religious and observing your faith, but I think what Hegseth does is he really puts it out there, and we even saw it during the press conference the other day when he's talking about the rescue of the downed airmen, when he was essentially comparing, the search, which starts on Friday, Good Friday, as he underscored, extends into Saturday, and then the pilot is actually, rescued early Sunday morning, and he underscores early Easter Sunday morning. So he's making this almost direct comparison to the resurrection. And I think it's becoming more and more apparent in his comments. He believes God is looking over American troops. God is making, is willing the Americans to victory. There's almost this kind of crusade-like, tone to some of his comments. And of course, he's been criticized and questioned about some of the tattoos that he wears, some of which are associated with the hard Christian nationalist right here in this country.
But I think to a lot of Brits, I mean, we have the audience of this podcast is around the world, and plenty of people listening now will not be British, or indeed quite a few of them will actually be US citizens. But